Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
Welcome back to The Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. I'm not under any impression that communications is a dangerous profession. But when I say, as I often do, that it's a minefield out there, I think the metaphor works. We're creators, we're storytellers, we're masters of message. We're the people CEOs, politicians, and leaders of all stripes turn to when they want to know how to say something. We're word people. So when the socio-political winds change, we have to deal with it in what we perceive to be the best interests of our employers or our clients. In other words, it's on us to get the message right. And when we live in a chaotic and volatile and unpredictable world of fractured and often oppositional audiences, we have to deftly and skillfully navigate the universe of possible reactions and outcomes to the words that we put out there into the world. And when we make mistakes and missteps, maybe nothing will happen. Or maybe a career will derail, or a company will go under. No big deal. Like I said, it's a minefield. I bring all of this up because my guest today is no stranger to walking the minefield. And as a comms pro who recently started her own consultancy, she's in the same boat as me. I realize I just mixed the metaphor a little bit, and will definitely mix it more, as is my want. But however you want to say it, she's flying without a net and building a communications practice in this chaotic world. She's built and grown businesses, led high-performing teams at some of the leading PR agencies, and been a constant innovator, a pioneer in healthcare communications. She's racked up recognition and rewards from Clio, Silver Anvil, PR Excellence, PR Week, MM&M, Sabre, DTC Awards, I for Pharma, PRSA, and more. It's a long list. I'd love to see her trophy case. She's an expert in global communications, corporate storytelling, narrative development, cultural insights, and she founded GW Health Public Relations last October and is dedicated to transforming how companies communicate about health and medicine. She's plugged in, tuned up, and it's hard to think of a service that's more necessary right now than helping audiences understand health and medicine today. Please join me in welcoming to the show my new friend, Aleisia Gibson Wright. Aleisia.
Hey, oh my gosh. I have been so looking forward to this conversation, and thank you so much for such a wonderful intro. That was really, really kind. I'm like, God, did I do all that? Maybe.
I love it when people introduce me. I mean, it's a love and hate thing. Like, I love it because they introduce you and you hear all these things that are, full disclosure, pulled off of some of your profiles and with a slight little tweak here and there. It's stuff that's out there in the world. And you're like, that's what's out there in the world when you hear it all at once.
Frightening.
It's frightening. And then, at least in my case, I'm just like, man, that's a high bar.
Oh boy.
I hope I can live up to that. But in your case, I've met you, I've seen some of your work, and that bar is extremely high, but you're always vaulting right over it.
You're amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have this conversation, and I'm so glad to have met you at that dinner party.
Talk about serendipity.
Seriously. We're just chomping down, and I look up and we just started talking, and it was, you're going to be on my podcast.
I know. Side note, like to people out there, LinkedIn is an incredible universe of business contacts and professionals and good people. And there are also operators and, kind of shady characters and your share of scammers and spammers and whatnot. But every once in a while, you get this kind of, I don't know, I want to call it a pitch, but a random message that on a normal day, you'd be like, ignore, delete. Right. But for some reason, you're like, maybe there's a there. And I was glad I did, because it was from this fellow named Chris Giddings, and who is an incredible networker. And it just turns out he's a giving sort and a very, he's a big believer in paying it forward. So he organizes these dinners in across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And, shout out to Chris Giddings. I went to one of those dinners. I didn't know what to expect. And was it 15 people there, Aleisia?
Yeah, it was like 15 people. And it was really, really far from my house. So I live in Bergen County, and I was really second guessing. I'm like, should I go all the way down here? What is really
2 hours.
This? It is a guy I met on LinkedIn. And I'm traveling like 50 miles to go sit with somebody who I don't even know is not a bot. But turns out it totally legitimate and really great conversation and connected me to wonderful people like you.
Thank you. I mean, same here. It's like, but I didn't have to go 2 hours. It's 25 minutes from my house. But I was thinking about that and just like the cavalcade of characters that was at that dinner. And it was very like a real weird smattering of people, and how fortuitous that, this woman I've never met is sitting right there, like catty cornered, and I overhear blah, blah, blah agency, something, something PR. And I'm like, my eyes, like I perked up. When you start your own business, especially as a consultant in our profession, you want to connect with the people who know what you're going through, and
exactly,
like attracts like. So very glad we connected there. But let's talk about you. Like, so how did you get to that dinner? What's the background? What's the story at a high level of, Aleisia Gibson Wright and all those awards and stuff? We don't have to know exactly, but like, what got you into healthcare? Why healthcare communications?
Yeah.
And what got you to that dinner eventually?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by telling you, I had no idea that I would be doing PR. When I started my career, it was in the newsroom. I was a stringer at the Miami Herald newspaper down, obviously in Miami, just out of college from Savannah State University, big HBCU. Mm-hmm. So I was, I just knew I was going to be a reporter. And I did that for several years until it dawned on me that maybe there's something else out there. I mean, reporting
a dark side?
Let me tell you, reporting can be dark because you are questioning everything, everyone. It's a tough job. And big hats off, or, high five to those who can stay in it for a really long time. But for me, I was just wondering if there was something else. I mean, you're not getting a ton of money from it unless you're on CNN broadcast or something like that. But if you're a writer, you're in it because it's your life's passion. It's the work you really want to do. So for me, I was just young enough and questioning enough to say, is this, the end all for me? And it just took one meeting of a really like stylish girl who had like the quintessential pointed toe, high heeled stiletto shoes and all this style. And I was like, oh my God, what do you do for a living? She's like, oh, I'm in PR. So I was like, okay, guess where I'm going to PR too. I want what you got.
Was that in Miami, or was that up there?
That was in Miami. No, that was just at the end of my career as a writer. Mm-hmm. But I ended up, taking her up on, her offer to bring me in and introduce me to some other PR folks. And I did that. I ended up at a stalwart agency in Miami. Reuben, Barney, and Berger is what it was called back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's RBB now. But anyway, I landed a role there in their corporate and healthcare division. And it was primarily crisis work. So I was doing a lot of crisis on the healthcare side.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And so I was moving up really quickly. So I was like, I'm too big and too good for this place. So, not really.
Especially if you have a like if the crisis bug gets you, it takes a particular type. And
it does.
I never did catch that bug when I was in the agency, but I enjoyed it when I was not in the agency, if that makes any sense. I kind of enjoyed being in some crisis communications when I was in a corporate role. But not all. Like it depends on where the crisis is coming from and what it's about. But because there were a couple that I really would have preferred never to have dealt with. But there's a certain kind of like, dopamine rush from those things.
There really is. And literally, Dan, this was like back in the day, I had a pager.
Ooh.
Strapped to my side. And this wasn't like situation. There's a difference between a crisis and a situation, right?
Yeah.
This was hardcore crisis. This was, okay, there's a reporter standing on the front steps. What do I do? Page Aleisia.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, whoa. I was like, are you sure you want to call me? But there's a strange sort of dopamine bolus that you get from it. And I really liked it. And you're right. You can either do it, keep a calm head, or you can't. But I liked it. I more than just the issues or crisis part of it, I really liked the healthcare aspect of it. Okay. So, and with that, I moved to New York and, set up 3 interviews. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm getting one of them, however it goes. And I got one of them. And
nice.
From there, that was, 2000. So I've been up here for 25 years.
Yeah.
Still in it.
It flies right by, believe me. And when we met, I was half joking about how we had never crossed paths before. Because I've been in PR and comms for at least that long. And I mean, although my career took a little bit of a winding road to get there, and I was in Japan for the largest part of it, actually, until 2010 or so. Actually, now come think of it, I'm almost at the point where I have to say, where I can't say I've been in Japan for more than half of my professional career, because it's almost like I've been here now. It's disheartening.
That is really interesting. Doing PR in Japan?
PR and marketing mostly, like just B2B stuff and mostly corporate side. And, I never did touch healthcare. Forget about Japan with healthcare and pharma and those very highly regulated areas that as a foreigner with zero experience in those fields, like zero industry experience. Like I could speak Japanese, but not that kind of Japanese. So I never got into it. And then when I moved back here, I was in varying jobs and I never got to deal with healthcare. Tangentially, once I was involved with a healthcare project at Edelman, but it was really just to do some web analysis of some stuff that wasn't, I was part of a larger team working on a pitch. But yeah, it's always been fascinating to me because healthcare, you think it's like pharmaceuticals, but then you realize that first of all, it's far broader, and anybody who's been paying attention to anything in the last couple of years knows that, the government involvement, regulations, everything having to do with wellness, everything having to do with well-being, designer drugs, all of that stuff falls under that umbrella.
Yeah, it's a vast field, and you're right. Most people think drugs or pharma
or hospitals
or hospitals, right? But there's so many layers in between those two things, from the hospital and the pharmaceutical company. There's the providers, there's the policymakers, there's the patient, there are the loved ones. That whole kaleidoscope of different audiences that are connected to healthcare. And I might not be connected to, say, a B2B product or conversation or PR program, but everybody's connected to healthcare. Everybody.
Yeah. I never thought of that stakeholder map, because that's, we always talk about audiences, and about how I keep saying audiences are fractured, but that's a different conversation. This and what we're talking about here is the actual audiences that are important to communicate to. Right. It's very different for a B2B company or for a consumer goods company than it is for a medical establishment or for a pharmaceutical. Because once you factor in patients and their loved ones, you're talking about some very different communications requirements. I think a lot of folks out there listening may not grasp the complexity of what it means to communicate to different stakeholders.
Yeah.
And just to be able to do that in healthcare I think it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, this year, and as we move deeper into 2025, I think it's all very polarizing. And I think the landscape of healthcare, public relations in general is really evolving so quickly.
Yeah.
And a large driver of that is technology and a lot of these social issues that we're all grappling with now. On top of that, there's, of course, the patient expectations are changing. I mean, the more people are actually coming out of their pockets for healthcare costs, I mean, people have opinions. They have certain expectations for how you're going to engage with them. And, your customer service person who might be your nurse is just that, just providing a customer service, and that the expectation is really evolved.
Yeah.
And, it's just all a part of how we are engaging is with each other as humans nowadays.
It's also the largest cost for any particular person outside of a home, usually, and even sometimes more than that. It's the largest thing you're going to spend money on in your lifetime is healthcare, whether it's through insurance or through care itself. Hopefully it's through the former, not the latter, but you're vested.
And even
everyone's
care,
vested.
Absolutely. And even not even necessarily your own personal care, but if you have a sick loved one, a husband, a wife, a mother, a child, that too, really impacts how you live. And it's all connected to healthcare.
It's interesting also, you mentioned patient expectations. It just made me think that, I haven't thought of it from the communicator standpoint, the person who's tasked with making sense of all this, that those patient expectations, map it out to, and let's call it just audience behavior if you want to. But those patient expectations, as technology certainly has advanced and as they have more access to research into the internet and to now AI and to global to global events and what's happening out there in the world, they inevitably start to try to take care of their own healthcare, or they second guess the professionals all the time or triple guess them. And not that that's a bad thing. It's always good to vet the people that you're, that are taking care of you. But sometimes it goes a little haywire, right? Especially if people don't understand the context of what they're reading. And then you have this idea that you compare the fact that you are paying XYZ for some sort of result, and the people in, I don't know, it's always Scandinavia. The people in Scandinavia are in utopia, and everything's lovely. It's never that simple, but it's up to the communicator to sort of navigate that.
Absolutely.
Do you have to deal with a lot of that? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll lean into that and say, I think the most important thing now with healthcare is the aspects of trust and, understanding how important it is to not just understand what the medicine is, but to trust the source of the information, of the actual product you're taking. There are a lot of questions. People are asking questions. It used to be back when the doctor or the nurse would tell you what you needed to do, and you did it or you didn't do it. But now there's a whole two-way dialogue. There's a conversation. There are lots of touch points to help people build trust or connection to a healthcare organization or even their HCP. There's just
healthcare provider?
A healthcare. Oh, yes. Sorry. The jargon. Yes, the healthcare provider, which could be the nurse. And nowadays we've got physician's assistants who are the new doctors. You don't get that much time with your physician that much anymore. You see a PA or you see a nurse practitioner. And, they of course run their recommendations by the physician, but you might not even see that physician.
It's you have to get an education to even understand how the system works, because the system doesn't really work the same for any one person. Like everybody has a different experience with, scare quotes, the system. And, I'm glad you're kind of bringing this up, because I haven't touched on this at all in the show. Now that I think about it, like the state of healthcare communications today.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we just started talking about it, but it is reflective of this breach of trust that you see across other sectors, probably more so in healthcare than in other places, because exactly what you said, that they, it touches everyone. And the trust breakdown. So what do you think is the state of healthcare comms today? And let me throw in a little thing. And I don't get political on the show, and so we don't.
Yeah.
Listeners out there, take this as however you will. But just factually speaking, the COVID experience, I think hit healthcare maybe hardest from both an actual dealing with the problem standpoint, but also the collapse of trust in the system. And what have you seen going through all that? Where is the trust now? Where is this? Like, where are we now? Are we recovering? Are we doing better? Are we on the right path? What's going on?
Yeah, I think at the core of healthcare PR is, of course, this imperative to build that trust and maintain that trust. And to your point about the COVID-19 pandemic, which, oh my gosh, it seems like a million years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. And It really sort of changed a lot about how we're living our lives today, right? But I think that pandemic really demonstrated how quickly public trust can erode very quickly. And I think it was obviously a catalyst to uncover some of the really significant, long-standing health disparities issues that we have. And the misinformation. And then there was, on top of all that, there was this misinformation about vaccines. And there were these ongoing concerns about access to care, and the public health organizations and the providers. They were all thrust into the spotlight and really trying to maintain credibility throughout it all. Mm-hmm. And it was difficult. And for a healthcare communicator who was also at home wearing a mask and, trying to do Zoom calls about really, really important things, a matter of life and death, understanding the impact of what the pharmaceutical industry and what all of the kaleidoscope of different stakeholders have on individuals and families is eye-opening. Because we before that, we were really focused as PR communicators. We were focused on getting drugs approved, making sure that that the press releases were correct and it had all of the fair balance and everybody understood the risks. And you wanted to make sure that all of the audiences understood what the medication itself was going to do or was not going to do, and you just wanted to make sure you had that sort of continuity of message, but COVID-19 turned all of that stuff upside down, and it really got us to really talk to people as individuals. And it really sort of shaped how we see in minority communities, how they interact, or uncovered how we've been interacting, or they've been interacting with healthcare for a very long time. And that is, out of a lack of trust. And the trust goes both ways. Physicians didn't really trust it some of their patients would take the medication or take a medication, so they never offered it. So I think that trust goes both ways.
Yeah. Something you said actually made me think that you said that during the COVID actually was the first, helped us from the PR so healthcare PR people started really communicating with individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like just looking back at the whole thing and trying to be as dispassionate as I possibly can, that one of the kind of new challenges that we faced as a communications profession, but also even wider as a society perhaps, was that this might have been the first time that the people that we trusted before attempted to communicate to everybody as a group rather than as disparate individuals. Your healthcare provider, your family practice, wherever it is where you were getting your healthcare information before, would give you the advice, help you solve your problems, might be, set your bones, cure your disease, whatever it was. But here we are, where every single person, at least at the very outset, right? February, March of 2020, February, March 2020, at the very outset, and say, we're all paying attention. We're all being told this is the marching orders, broad brush for everyone. I think that's where everything started to fall apart right there, because there's no such thing that works in the United States of America. I mean, it's too many people. It's too broad of a territory. There's too many, this is even before politics and ideology started to get involved, which it should never get involved in medicine. The fact that it was even allowed to get involved in medicine is a problem for every, on all sides. That should never have, it should never have happened. But you had to look at this like, wait a second, the breakdown is probably because they're not talking to me anymore. They're just talking to this group or that group or whatever. And they doubled down, right? The experts and the leaders doubled down on things that we now know are not correct. But I don't know what they were thinking at the time, and I'm not going to make that judgment with whether they had the right, whether they were acting with the best intent or not. I hope that they were. But when you look back at things, you find where the flaws are, but you don't always see those at the time, and that's understandable. But en masse, as a communicator, right? This whole idea of this mass communication really is for health. Actually, it astounds me that we went there, and it's the first time I've ever really thought about it. But I think that I'm keen to understand how the PR profession has, what they've learned from that, and how the state of healthcare comms is moving forward now.
Yeah. Listen, I think we all make a huge mistake when we think that we can scrub cultural aspects of communications out. Culture shapes who you are. It's your values, it's your belief, it's your language, it's your customs, it's your lived experience. So when you try to scrub something like that out of something as personal as healthcare communications, you're doing your organization a disservice, you're doing patients a disservice, and you're not going to be effective. Mm-hmm. So in healthcare marketing, I think cultural comms, I say cultural, but I don't even know if that's the right word, but communication, because I always go back to this notion of inclusive marketing or inclusive communications has now become sort of this hot button thing, when in and of itself, it's just communicating effectively. You want to tailor your message depending on the audience and depending on that audience's experience in life and how they can receive your message. That's culture, and that's inclusion, and that's just marketing.
Yeah. Let's stop. Let's just kind of hover on this for a second, because I was looking forward to talking to you about cultural communications, because I think it's critically important, and it needs to be distinguished from the topic of conversation in government circles and in corporate America, et cetera, with the DEI. These are related and unrelated. And I think it's really important for people to understand that what we're talking about here is not advocating for a particular policy. What we're talking about here is communicating a message by the best through the best possible channels. And when we say, at least you and me today here on this, in our conversation, when we say inclusive communications, I mean, it's just take the word at its value. It's not about, making judgments about where people come from or their, what they look like, or it's not identity based. It's about making sure that the audiences are communicated to in the manner in which they need to be communicated to for these critically important messages. So where does that lead us? I mean, you've got communities out there, and we can call them underserved communities. We can call them,
typically under-resourced. Yeah. I think
under-resourced,
because
under-resourced communities.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So we have those kinds of things. We also have neighborhoods that are very culture-based and sort of, like enclaves of, let's say, there's, a certain area where it's very heavily Asian, or there's a certain area where it's very heavily first generation immigrants from someplace, right? They are all going to respond to a communication in different ways based on whatever baggage they carry, based on what their culture has told them, the culture in which they grew up with. The closer they are to that original culture, especially for immigrants, the closer they are to that original culture, the more the communication needs to be tailored for that original culture. It's a complicated. I think it's a complicated. It takes a lot of skill, and it's not. And again, it's not about, a policy. It's about, all right, there's a sickness. We need to communicate this sickness. How are we going to communicate so these people take the right measures?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a strange sort of conflation in with two words. There's the DE&I and inclusive marketing conflation. DE&I is primarily workforce. It's hiring. This, marketing is just marketing. And then there's this other conflation between the word culture and then minority communities.
Yes.
Because you can also be your culture. If you are a rancher in Montana, that's a culture. And how I would reach a rancher in Montana is just how I think as a marketer, they will be receptive to hearing the message. Yeah. So that is a part of their culture. So I just want to make sure that when we say culture, everybody doesn't think, an immigrant or it's a word, and it's a word that talks about leans into our values, our beliefs, our languages, and some of our customs, but those aren't necessarily relegated to race. They're just into humans.
Thank you for giving me some more context on that. Because that's exactly, I think first of all, I think you're totally right. The word culture has been conflated with DE&I in different ways.
Right. For
good or for bad, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the fact that culture, a person's background, a person's the way in which they communicate, the language they speak, whether they're out there every day on the open range like a rancher, or whether they're huddled up in a city like with all their buddies, like some of us have been in our life. These are different cultures. They need to be communicated to in ways that make sense, especially around critical issues.
Right. I was going to say, and just to add, access to care could be the same in an inner city as it could be in Montana. If you don't have access, you don't have access. How we get you the access might be different, but how we talk to you about the need for healthcare should be tailored to how you can best receive it.
See, this is the minefield that I referred to a little bit in the upfront. That I think the inclination for a lot of executives, or for even the public in some ways, is to immediately jump to some kind of conclusion that they're not able to do cultural marketing anymore, or they're not able to do, culture-focused communications because of the way that the socio-political winds are blowing. And sure, I guess it is laden with landmines here and there. You certainly want to be careful, but we're always careful. I mean, that's the nature of who we are. It's just a matter of, no, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. This is a critical part of what we do. I would, writ large, globally, we're always practicing cultural communications. So, you're not going to put a campaign out in Japan the same way you would here.
Right.
I mean,
because that's not good marketing.
It's not good marketing.
It's not good marketing.
And what do we want when we market and when we communicate? We want our message to hit, resonate, sink in, persuade, right?
That's and be authentic and feel authentic so that the end user is receptive.
Well, if you're the good guys, you want your message to be like, like that. If you're the bad guys, you want to put out some nefarious message and have that permeate, get in there, which is a problem. But ultimately we want to reach people, right? We want to resonate, reach and resonate.
And I'll just add, I mean, I think there are like 5 sort of critical things when you're marketing or if you're an organization in health looking to market about around your medicine or your hospital's capabilities. I think it is, at the end of the day, building trust and credibility. It's about improving things like health literacy in an effort to improve, outcomes. How people read information is different based on their lived experience. And you want to drive positive behavior change. You want them to listen. You want them to be receptive to what you're saying so that they or their family members are healthier in the long run. And it goes to strengthen your brand reputation at the end of the day. This is your organization. This is your medication. This is whatever it is you're putting out into the sphere to be received. It's going to be tied back to your reputation. And if you can stand on the fact that you're not afraid to speak to people in a culturally relevant way or a way that resonates, and you're not, you're against broad brush campaigning or marketing, then I think your reputation will stand the test of time, because the country, I'm speaking of the US right now, that the country is evolving. It's changing. Again, going back to patient expectations, looking at sort of the demographics within this country. It's all changing and it's evolving. And, the Gen Zers or the Zoomers, as I think they're called, and the Boomers have very different expectations. So we have to lean into that. And I think the only way to do that is to be receptive and open to difficult conversations or challenging points of view for how you should be communicating.
It's funny you mentioned Gen Z. It's always it's a common topic that we talk about, but that is a cultural communication. That it spans across identities and cultures. It's generational, but by virtue of being part of a particular generation, you have to communicate with them in a specific way. And it's an aspect of cultural marketing, cultural communications. I would say. You mentioned 5 things. Sorry, you said there's 5 critical things: trust, credibility, health literacy, positive behavior change. Reputation.
Reputation. Sorry. Yes, I think I left off the 5th one, and that's the overall effort to reduce health disparities. Okay. When one community's sick, we're all kind of sick. We're all interconnected. So the end goal should always be to reduce some of these health disparities that have been existing in our communities, our cultures for a very long time. Yeah. And it's time now to change that. And we've got the technology, we've got the reach, we've got evolved expectations on the part of patients for companies and organizations to do better. So there's an opportunity for us to really make a difference, despite all of the rhetoric and the shenanigans, I say, that are going on.
It takes, look, it takes a certain amount. I was on a call earlier today with someone who's an expert in work life, basically, work life. I'm not gonna say balance. She calls something different, but basically future of work, how we work together, all that kind of good stuff, and workplace well-being, et cetera, et cetera. And we were talking about it a little bit, and she said that there's this issue with incoming generations of workers, right? Who largely because of some of the benefits of AI for the older generations, we have to figure out new ways to train them. They're missing out on the training experience, and because they have all these tools available to them.
Yeah.
Well, we have to figure out what's all the grunt work that used to be their training ground is no longer there. So how do we train them, and how do we make companies how do we convince companies to be willing to invest in the future of their workforce by being willing to cut margins on these younger employees, for example. And the reason I bring this up is not because we were talking about young employees. It's because something you mentioned about disparities in access and technology made me think about this whole thing where, okay, you have all these young people coming in who have some degree of understanding of AI and whatnot, right? Or it's frankly, it's not that hard to pick up at the basic level anyway. But that made me think that when we're talking about healthcare disparities across different, geographies or locations or whatever, in different communities, the access to technology is in and of itself uneven, right? I mean, there are in the under-resourced communities, for example, they don't have as much capability to just turn on their phones or their computers or their iPads or whatever it is to then play around with ChatGPT or whatever, right? And that's just that's radically oversimplifying the situation. But what I'm getting at is when it comes to healthcare, access to technology, and we can even start to pivot here a little bit into AI, because access to technology means ability to start to get into the benefits of AI, or even, and some of the drawbacks too. But when it comes to healthcare, I have personally found that AI has been extraordinarily helpful. I mean, I don't even know if WebMD is still in business because the information that you get from the various platforms is so much richer and better. And, I just know myself that with the benefits of wisdom, age, context, and understanding, I know how far I can trust this, and then when I need to go talk to my doctor, right? So, and I know that's not the case for everybody. So I don't, folks living at home, don't try this at home. Go to your doctor if you have a problem. But I'm just saying, I'm able to describe, to my AI, your patient, you're a healthcare consultant. Your patient is a 53-year-old male who is blah, 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 and has pain in the shoulder. And I can give loads and loads of context because I grew up in a family that is very accustomed to complaining about health and, talking about what medicines they've had, so my culture, I can get on there and I can just do all this. And then the AI will come back to me and say, well, these are the three things that are most likely wrong here. You need to see a healthcare professional, but blah, blah, blah. And, I showed that to one of my doctors once, and he was like, that's an incredible brief that you gave it.
Well,
that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of what it is. It's
part of what it is, right?
Understanding what to how to ask what you're trying to get,
right?
The outcome you're trying to get, right?
So the question, or the kind of where I want to toss it over to you is, that kind of experience that I've just described is not common, but when we talk about access, even that level of healthcare access, I think, and I would call it healthcare access, is extremely different from person to person, community to community. Whether or not you have access to these tools or not is itself creating a further gap. So how do you think this, but on the other hand, the, AI, some of these technology solutions are far cheaper than some of the healthcare solutions. For example, going to visit your doctor, going to do things. And again, I'm not suggesting you replace one with the other, but there's got to be a mix there. There's got to be a mix that works, that will improve the livelihoods of people. And at the very basic level, some of these disparities aren't that expensive to solve. And do you think that's going to play a role in access to healthcare? And I know, look, I'm not talking about, I know you're a communicator, right? So it's just from your perspective as a communicator, do you think it's going to play a role? I mean, in the access to healthcare in the audiences and stakeholders that you care about?
Listen, yes, and I think it could, but we've got to keep in mind that AI is really sort of regurgitating or pulling information from sources that already exist for the most part. I mean, you do have some that are adaptive and can do its own individual thinking, apparently. I was frightened about that. But for the large part, I mean, like ChatGPT goes and it scrapes information from the web. And what we know is a lot of that information is inaccurate. So is it an opportunity to make it to supercharge efficiency? Yes. But there's also an issue of is it designed enough for people's cultures or in individuals? Is it enough? I don't think we're there yet. I just don't think we're there. I think once we are able to scrape or infuse accurate medical information into these AI tools, then perhaps, but there's so many medical inaccuracies out there that live on the web and that will perpetuate through AI platforms that we can't 100% trust. I don't even know if this is the question, but it's just a thought that I had, and I don't think we have enough programmers of color or of different backgrounds to interrogate some of the information that's going into these platforms. So I think there's definitely an opportunity. I think we're still pretty far away from it.
It's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag.
However you cut it, I do think because I'm able to describe the context in such utter detail and too much detail, as my wife might tell me, I get great answers from AI, and but I confirm with my healthcare. I'm not going to I'm not going to ask it to prescribe me any medication because it certainly can't. But I have asked it to validate a medication regime that I'm on, for example. I have asked it. No, I've said to it, look, I visited they say, get second opinions. I went to AI for my second opinion once, and I said, your patient is a 53-year-old male, blah, 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 blah. And went through the whole thing. And I said, his doctor's just prescribed the following medications, evaluate this medical regime or this medication regime. It was awesome. Like, it gave me some
very cool
deep information. And then I was like, let me check. And I went to to Mayo Clinic and other places to look. And I mean, spot on, great information. So it's good after the fact. The thing is, though, that I'm educated about this and I know how to use it.
That's the thing.
And I'm aware of my own healthcare situation, and I take interest in it. That's not everybody. A lot of people have no awareness of how it works. They have very little awareness of the conditions that they're exposed to the possibilities of, what their healthcare outcomes and outlooks are, because they don't necessarily go to see their doctors that often. They're not paying attention to their diagnostics. And I've always been geeky about that kind of stuff. So, I'm a focus group of one, and that's all it
well,
will
may
be.
you live forever, Dan.
Oh, man. It's all anxiety driven, everybody.
It's all
it really
anxiety
is.
driven.
It really is. But the point is, though, that I think that there's a lot of potential within technology to help address some of those disparity issues. And I think you're totally right, where the content that is delivered by, whether it's an AI or a database or some other tool, that it has to take into account the deeper aspects of the patient profile. Whether that's for pure physiological reasons, which would make sense from a medical standpoint, or it's to sort of make some, let's say, statistical judgments or statistical kind of estimates about, the likelihood of this person to have been to the doctor in the past year, or the likelihood of this person to have been, regularly, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's very, it's a little bit of minefield, but I think it is doable. I don't know. Are you seeing any of that?
I can definitely, I can see it in the future. But until that we get there, we've got telehealth. So you get a little bit of both. Hey,
that's pretty good.
You'll get a little bit of both. You'll get some human interaction, and you'll get some automation. So I definitely see a future. I'm a big proponent of AI. I just understanding what I know about where the country is and how people receive information. I think we just still have a really long way to go.
Yeah, it's also a big function of what your fundamental issue is. I mean, you're like, God forbid you have a horrifying, terrible, disease or condition. I would hope that you would be going to your doctor for that. But if you have a cold, or you bump your shoulder and you're like, it kind of hurts, do a little twisty the wrong way when you're doing your sit-ups. Not that that's happened to me. Because when you get a certain age, you twisty the wrong way, and suddenly you're like, suddenly you're like, wait a second, that's not good. That's different than hey, I found a lump or something. These are very different things. But it's not that far off, to get those diagnostics from. I mean, AI is already doing it for radiology in a lot of places and on, right? But that's in-house, right? The doctors are using it. That's not us. I'm not going to the local Walgreens and getting into the X-ray booth, right? They don't have such a thing, and then like bringing that home and taking photos and showing it to Claude. It's really, although that would be an interesting experiment, but it's just the professionals and the knowledge that they already have, right? But I did want to understand, though, a little bit more about the future of cultural communications. I think we've been really almost getting there, and my listeners know that I always talk about the fractured audiences that we have. I don't see them coalescing anytime soon. And those fractures are along multiple lines. That doesn't mean that you belong to one particular audience. It means you probably belong to 4,500 different audiences, right? So in that fracturing kind of world, to base communications on culture is extremely difficult and a little bit broad brushy sometimes. But it's a necessary input. I think it's a necessary part of the calculus that goes into deciding how to communicate with somebody. But how's that going to, how do you think that's evolving into the future? And do you think that cultural communication, in the sense that we've talked about it here, is going to continue to be an important part of the comms toolkit?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's going to be a part of the communications toolkit for sure. we talk a lot about storytelling in our space, right? And in an effort, because you're right, that I could show up in 45,000 different personas.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see a story or I hear a story, a person who looks like me or can relate to me, and so I feel like I can relate to them, I think that's going to be the critical turning point. Like the more we can storytell, the more we can show real people. I think that too helps us sort of hurdle over the DE&I aspect. If you're just storytelling, you're just showcasing a person's real life lived experience. That's just storytelling. And I think there's an opportunity to lean into that more. And I think the expectations of patients and healthcare consumers is more wanting to see themselves, some aspect of themselves in who's communicating the story.
It's highly personal.
It's highly personal.
That particular field. Yeah, I agree. I would just offer a caveat that, especially people out there listening about when they hear the word storytelling, it hits in different ways. In fact, I just released a video the other day about how people misinterpret storytelling through a different channel that I have. But the thing about storytelling is, it's not fiction. Like, we're not talking about fictional storytelling. We're not talking about fairy tales. We're not talking about making shit up. What we are talking about is building a narrative that resonates with someone, that has a beginning, middle, and an end, that really plugs into our fundamental human nature to want information delivered to us in the form of a talk around the campfire, right? It's hardwired in to all of us. Now,
it's your For You page.
It's your For You page. That's a great way to think about it, except some of those For You pages don't have an end, which is, there's endless. So stories need to sort of go somewhere. And you need to be the hero of that journey, or, the product needs to be the hero of that journey, whatever it is. There is the caveat I was going to say is that we have to be real careful. Storytelling is so powerful that we are delivering the same set of facts to every audience, that require those facts. So I'm not saying that if you have let's just use a product, for example, if you have an iPhone and an iPhone has 50 features, right? You can tell a story around those 50 features, but you might leave some of them out for some audiences and some of them out for other audiences, and some of them out for other audiences, but you will be factually using the same features, right? The accessibility features, for example, are not going to be important for like 22-year-olds for the most part who want to use the iPhone, right? There's always some, but the large print, the fact that you can read things very large doesn't really matter to people who don't wear glasses. So, that's just one example. Like in healthcare, though, most of the facts are salient to everybody, and there are, it's important to make sure that you tell the stories in the way that not only resonates, but also delivers the same information across, so there's no disparity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The continuity of the message should be there. It's just the messenger is as important as the message in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I don't think that that's a DE&I issue at all. I think that this is simply good communication. Right?
I agree 100%. I don't know where this conflation started. I wish I could go back and undo it. It's exhausting, especially as a person who sort of built my new level of career as an entrepreneur, talking to people in ways in which they can receive a message. And that's just, again, PR and marketing message. Again, the message is as important as the messenger and vice versa.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I'm just looking at our timer. I can't believe we've already been talking for like an hour. So before we finally wind it down, I did want to ask you. So tell me a little bit about how you're putting all this into practice now. And where are you focusing? And what is in your mind? I think the key point that you want to deliver to your clients, to our listeners.
Yes.
With regard to your business, yeah.
Yeah, I am leaning into the fact that I have brought many products to market, as a part of big teams. I know healthcare, I know the regulated environment. I also know the importance of messaging and the importance of storytelling and the evolving world in which we live in is doing just that. It's evolving. It's changing constantly. So I have created this company that's gonna flex and be the pendulum that swings back and forth like culture does. So it is about get in where you can fit in and do the work that is important, that helps you reach the end goal, and that is to make sure that people are living healthier lives. It's also about driving revenue. And I also can't stand the fact that we leave that part of the conversation off. Being inclusive in your marketing is good business. It is.
Yeah.
It is about bringing more people under the tent. It is about keeping more people under the tent through compliance and persistence and all of those things that keep us healthy. And that's it. I feel like my company is the company for the future, because I think it is going to, the culture swings back and forth, and we will be there as it swings back and forth. And it is about real people. It's about real stories. It's about helping companies maximize their business opportunity by reaching more people.
Yeah. And it's going to be critical going into the future for communicators, having a steady...
You've got to be able to flex. You've got to be able to flex. Because one thing that is constant is change.
I think that sums up a lot of the way that, me and some other folks just like us who are out there, who've hung out our own shingle. There's this capability to flex like never before.
Mm-hmm. You learn a lot about yourself.
Oh man. And, some of it's not easy. And, there's a lot of anxiety and it's daunting in some ways. And maybe you don't have the right formula when you start out, whatever it is. There's a lot of variables. But I remember 20 something years ago when I went out on my own for the first time, very, very different situation. I couldn't do anything without, I could do my work, but I couldn't move my business forward unless I had a consultant to help me with this, or somebody to help me with putting together my payroll or my billing systems, or whatever there is. But now, between AI and all the other tools that are out there, we have a lot at our disposal that we still have to spend time with it, but it allows us to focus in on our audiences and our customers more. And I think the timing has never been better to be out on your own. And I'm glad that I met you and that you're out on your own. And I predict that we will collaborate on certain things. We've talked about it a little bit.
Can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
It'll happen. But look, Aleisia, I love talking to you, and there was a couple other things that I had on my list that I wanted to kind of reach out to you about. But we'll save it for another time. We had a little conversation on LinkedIn a while back about this whole displaced professionals situation.
Oh, the displaced professionals.
I didn't like the word, and you were like, you were okay with it. And I was thinking, oh, it'd be cool to have a little disagreement on my show to show how normal adult people can actually have different opinions about something and survive. But we'll save that for another time. And I think I want our listeners to find you, to go and to meet you. Check out Aleisia Gibson Wright on LinkedIn, and her name will be spelled properly in the episode title. It's not it's not exactly as it sounds. Gibson Wright is, Aleisia isn't. So it's Aleisia Gibson Wright, gwhealthpr.com, and GW Health Public Relations. So check her out at gwhealth.com. Look for her on LinkedIn. Any other place that people can find you, Aleisia? Are you out speaking? Are you out like doing the circuit? Are you,
Well, I'm working on something on Thursday, but that's got to wait for a little while. There's going to be an unveiling this summer, apparently.
Uh-oh.
I know.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'll be at conferences. So we'll I'm sure I'll see somebody in the industry at a conference, and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, you were on the Trending Communicator. I heard you." And
that would be gold.
Awesome.
Well, we do have a lot of mutual contacts, and I know it's another reason why I was shocked we hadn't met before. But to all of our friends out there, our mutual friends, to all the folks listening out there who are our friends to be, thank you very much. And Aleisia, I got to have you back on. This is going to be great. There's so much more to talk about.
Well, let's talk displaced.
We'll put a pin in that one.
We'll put a pin in it.
Thanks so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you. This has been so much fun. I could keep going.
Thanks for taking the time to listen in on today's conversation. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe through the podcast player of your choice, share with your friends and colleagues, and leave me a review. 5 stars would be preferred, but it's up to you. Do you have ideas for future guests, or you want to be on the show? Let me know at dan@trendingcommunicator.com. Thanks again for listening to The Trending Communicator.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.